It's almost midnight in Brussels. At the airport, passengers are boarding Flight 21 to Moscow. An Italian man named Terenzio Gallo is in an awful hurry to get on any plane flying west. He doesn't care which country. With a ticket to New York, he orders a drink and keeps waiting, extremely agitated. The TV is showing a street where all the people seem to have collapsed at the same time. People watching at the airport gasp in shock when they see the news anchor is also unconscious. Something very strange is going on, and Terenzio seems to know more than everyone else. He attacks a security guard and grabs his gun, forcing his way into Flight 21. Only a few passengers are inside when the door closes, not even the pilot there. So Terenzio has to yell orders to the co-pilot, Matthew. He says they must fly west immediately if they want to survive. Ignoring the crazy talk, Matthew tries to fight him, and the gun goes off. His left hand gets injured, and he can't fly the plane like that. Among the passengers is Sylvie Martins. Formerly a helicopter pilot, she volunteers to cooperate. Terenzio forces Matthew and Sylvie to take off despite the silence from the control tower. Gabrielle, the only flight attendant aboard, helps the terrified passengers the best way she can. The pilots try to dissuade the hijacker, but Terenzio says he's not planning to do anything. As a NATO officer, he came across privileged information about a global catastrophe. The sun is killing everyone. It has already started in Eastern countries. Convinced that they're dealing with a nutjob, Sylvie decides to focus on a concrete problem. Matthew's hand is not looking good. One more passenger is recruited to help out. Her name is Laura, and she is a nurse. Without the proper tools, she is forced to use a hot knife to cauterize the wound. Matthew's painful screams are heard by the passengers. The pilot then realizes that everyone's increasing terror can quickly escalate into a tragedy. Trying to keep it under control with a little lie, he says the hijacker only wants a ride. They will drop him off at the specified location and then resume the flight to Moscow as normally as they can. His actual hope is to be rescued by fighter jets at some point. Their departure was certainly not discreet, so the authorities must have been informed by now. One of the passengers is a man named Ayaz. He overhears parts of the conversation in the cockpit and begins to suspect they have been lied to. A general commotion around a sick boy is Ayaz's chance to overpower Terenzio. With the hijacker now locked in the bathroom, Matthew is brought to explain what's really happening. He tells them everything Terenzio said before. They are not so sure the man is crazy. Some of them remember a few strange things were happening before they left. An Instagram influencer named Eames saw a friend suffocating during a video call for no apparent reason. Matthew explains that they don't have much fuel left and part of the avionics is damaged by that same bullet that wounded his hand. Iceland is the best option now, and they will know more as soon as they land. Everyone agrees to the plan, but when they get closer to the airport, they see a pile of crashed aircraft. Unable to land the plane, they divert to Scotland. What they saw in Iceland supports Terenzio's theory, so they decide to release him. He accidentally heard his boss talking about it in a NATO meeting. All he knows is that the sun rays became toxic to all living beings, and hiding indoors makes no difference. Somehow the gamma radiation got amped up to crazy levels with no warning. After an emergency landing in Scotland, everyone rushes outside to check their phones. That crazy Italian was telling the truth. Half of the world population is dead, including pretty much everyone they know back in Belgium. The other half is reporting the solar apocalypse until dawn comes for them too. Which will happen here in less than an hour, so they hurry up to gather supplies and fuel. 3 RAF servicemen show up asking for a ride. One of them suggests flying northwest, putting more miles between them and the approaching sunlight faster. Thank God one of them went to school, right? They take off again, and everyone uses their expertise to help fix things. Internet connection is restored, and the passengers take doom scrolling to a whole new level. Someone finds a picture of those RAF men and finds out they're actually terrorists who were being deported to Afghanistan. Their next stop is Canada. Now they have 2 hours before Mr. Blue Sky comes creeping over them. The plan is to send the terrorists to fetch something and leave them behind. The men insist on taking 2 more people with them, Gabriel and a passenger named Jacob. Jacob manages to lock them up, but nobody told Gabriel about the 3 strangers, so she refuses to abandon them. Jacob makes it back on the plane, but the poor flight attendant stays behind. Breaking free, the terrorists chase the plane but only manage to put a small crack in one of the windows. A radio signal from Hawaii is picked up. They can't hear it clearly, but there's reason to believe there's an underwater bunker there full of survivors. Matthew wants to fly there immediately, and some of the passengers back him up. Sylvie and the rest of them think it's reckless. While they are arguing about it, several alarms go off. They find out that one of the terrorists was able to grab the landing gear, and the man is still there, which means that they won't be able to land anywhere until they kick that jerk out. Trying to shake off the party crasher, Matthew flies the plane to a much higher altitude. That totally backfires, though. The cracked window blows up, sucking the bejesus out of everything inside. In the best duct tape meme style, someone gets it fixed with a wooden board. Ayaz helps out a woman named Zara with a makeshift respiratory tube for her son Dominic. Terenzio gets rid of the terrorist, who is still hanging there despite every single law of nature. Hawaii is no longer an option after all the changes in altitude and wasted fuel. But another signal comes up, and this one is much more interesting. 2 people are talking, and one of them is in space. The other one is at a mysterious place referred to as Stara 17. It seems to be another kind of bunker where people manage to survive the sun. To learn more about it, they decide to return to Brussels. Terenzio agrees to take them to the NATO building where he learned about all this and help them find more information. Getting there, one group is tasked with refueling the plane while Laura and Zara take Matthew to a hospital because of an infection in his hand. Terenzio takes Ayaz and an older man named Rick to the NATO headquarters. Rick finds a recording about Stara 17. It's a bunker in Bulgaria, located under a dam. Just like the underwater bunker in Hawaii, it seems to be safe from the gamma rays gone wild. Terenzio and Ayaz were also supposed to be looking for something useful, but they decide to have a fist fight instead. What a pair of geniuses. Terenzio wins and leaves the other man on the floor, telling Rick he already left. On the plane, he fakes surprise at Ayaz's absence. They can't wait for him much longer, so Matthew starts the engine. His jaw drops when he sees a car coming their way. Ayaz comes out of it, in terrible shape. Terenzio gets handcuffed when the others learn the truth, and Sylvie prepares everyone for their trip to Bulgaria. They will have only 20 minutes to reach the bunker, so they must be sharp. Alone in the bathroom, Ayaz is tending to his injuries from the fight when he has a seizure. He makes the stupid decision to not tell anyone about it. Asked about Terenzio's fate, he says he should be released due to the extreme circumstances. All that leveled head disappears when they land. Ayaz volunteers to drive one of the 2 cars available. The other group goes with Sylvie. Just as expected, Ayaz has another seizure and they crash. The first group is already far ahead, turning right at an intersection. Arriving at the facility, there's a tricky gate where someone needs to keep pressing a button, otherwise it will close permanently. Terenzio volunteers to wait for the second group. When everyone else from the first group is inside, Sylvie handcuffs him to the gate just to make sure he will really wait. But when those poor guys finally reach the intersection on foot, they turn left. It's no big deal for them, as both entrances lead to the same place, and the 2 groups reunite. For Terenzio, though, that's terrible news. Sylvie realizes what she has done, but it's too late to go outside and save him. The group is welcomed at Stara 17 by NATO soldiers. Colonel Lom is the man in charge. Weeks later, they are beginning to get used to life in the bunker. Now they are in contact with other survivors from all over the globe, and a scientist named Horst is experimenting on rats to find a sun antidote. But it's not all fun, sadly. Ines, the Instagrammer, is the only young girl down there, and she gets constantly bullied or harassed. A man named Hermans blames the newcomers for the diminishing supplies. They begin to plan a trip to a seed bunker in Norway, so they can begin to grow something. Afraid of the consequences if someone finds Terenzio, Sylvie volunteers to that mission. But Colonel Lom assigns it to Matthew and one of his men, Captain Marcus. Ayaz and Jacob will come along, as well as Ambassador Thea Bisset. During breakfast, the colonel talks to Ayaz about Zara. He suspects they are having an affair. Ayaz denies it but says he would prefer to stay with her and Dominic. Lom agrees to send someone else instead. It can't hurt to have people procreating, right? Talking to American survivors, they learn that the Russian bunker has gone silent. The cosmonaut has also been MIA for a few days now. Laura and Horst check up on the rats they had left outside. Sadly, none has survived daylight. Back inside, Rick is enlisted to help them catch more rats. Excited about the science project, Dominic tiptoes out of bed to chase a rat. His mother follows him and both of them get trapped in the generator room. Sylvie and Lom decide to drive to the airbase and get a blowtorch to open the door. Lom finds Terenzio's remains right away, and that increases his suspicions about Sylvie. But he has a much bigger problem at the moment. The airbase has been hit by a missile. Lom suspects the Russians heard about the trip to Norway and decided to steal the seeds. They find no blowtorch, but Lom watches an interesting footage of the front gate. In the bunker, everyone is about to melt from the heat because the generator is turned off. Some of the soldiers decide to force Zara to turn it back on, but Ayaz fights them, defending his new family. Colonel Lom arrives at the perfect moment to get hit by an accidental shot. His men try to save him, but to no avail. Zara realizes that they won't make it out of that room, so she decides to turn that thing back on before it's too late. Ayaz keeps desperately punching the door and screaming her name, but she's already gone, and so is Dominic. With the leadership role so abruptly vacant, Thea seems to be the one calling the shots now. But she knows that her authority hangs by a thread in such an odd mix of soldiers and civilians. While Ayaz plunges into grief, Hermans and Philip are also mourning and preparing Lom for his burial. That's when they find something in his pocket and immediately take it to a laptop to check it out. It's a copy of that video. The two soldiers watch Sylvie handcuffing a fellow NATO officer. Philip vows to avenge him soon. Right now, obtaining those seeds is the highest priority. Thea assembles a group to go to Norway. Herself, Matthew, Jacob, Marcus, and a man named Osman. During Zara's funeral, Ayaz resurfaces and volunteers to go with them. Everyone thinks it's a bit odd, as he was barely responsive until just now. But there's not time to argue. And there's already too much tension in the air. Marcus was the only soldier to attend the funeral, and when it's Lom's turn to be buried, the civilians return the favor by not showing up either. On top of that, the Russians are still silent and could well be up to something. When Thea's group gets to the airport, Matthew radios the bunker to touch base before leaving. He talks to Ines, and she says they're all fine. Just after that, the soldiers take over the place, holding all the civilians at gunpoint. They announce that this is Sylvie's trial for the murder of a NATO officer. Then, they play the video for everyone. Her friends look surprised, but slowly begin to justify her actions based on Terenzio's dangerous behavior. That gets them all locked up together, while the boys decide what to do. At the moment, the only civilian who was not in Flight 21 is the Spanish ambassador, Gerardo. He takes the role of mediator, but neither side seems very happy with his contribution. Taking advantage of Thea's absence, the soldiers throw a huge party with lots of booze. Hermans comes down to get Horst and Rick. The girls fear this might be an excuse to attack them, but they actually force Horst to fight the old man for their amusement. Fed up with their cruelty, the scientist punches Philip instead and gets punished with a beating. Meanwhile, the other group has arrived safely in Norway. No Russian ambush waiting for them. A woman named Gia is still alive and guarding the seed vault. After 5 weeks isolated and without her medication, she has gone pretty much insane. Gia is convinced that her colleagues were victims of a poisonous gas. When they tell her it was the sun, she laughs and wonders who is the crazy one here. They want to take her with them, but she says no. She also refuses to let them take any seeds. Matthew complains that everyone is so difficult. He hates the new normal. Back in Bulgaria, someone messes up radio duty and lets Marcus know that Ines is in trouble. His crush on the girl is no secret, and he'll probably keep trying the radio to find out what happened. Afraid that the other groups might not come up if they suspect something is wrong, Hermans grabs Ines and makes her tell Marcus that everything is just fine. She manages to escape him and screams for help before running away. The soldier decides to let her go, closing the door behind him as he enters the bunker. Ayaz also heard Ines screaming on the radio. Marcus wants to return tonight, even if it means talking less seeds with them. Ayaz backs him up, and Osman wonders if this is actually his revenge. Gia agrees to join them when they pretend that she is right about the gas. The deception is eventually revealed, and she begins to act up, so they just tie her up for the trip. Sylvie and the others plot to overthrow the soldiers, but Rick betrays her to avoid a violent insurrection. Outside the bunker, Ines is surprised to see a helicopter and flags them down. Believe it or not, these are the Russians now. They want to know who took their planes down. Ines says the NATO soldiers did it, and she disagreed with that, which is why she got kicked out. The Russians not only buy it, but also agree to help her. She takes them to the bunker, and they blow the door open. In Norway, Ayaz rushes to the radio when he hears Ines calling. She recaps everything in a few seconds. Maybe her next career won't be on Instagram after all. When Ayaz runs to tell the others, Gia breaks free, shuts the door to the cockpit and proceeds to destroy all the controls, to everyone's horror. In the bunker, there's a brief confrontation between soldiers and the Russian. It soon becomes evident that someone has attacked both groups, so they join force to find out who the enemy is. Gia succumbs to daylight, and the cockpit is cleared, but Matthew doesn't think they can fix the plane at all. Jacob's only hope lies in that secret enemy who's also after the seeds. A hostile visit is still company after all. Matthew looks like he could use a few Russians now. Realizing that they're stuck in Norway, Ayaz decides it's time for some reckoning. Marcus confirms his suspicions and confesses what he did. Zara and Dominic were not trapped by accident. He didn't know the door was so hard to open, but he was the one who closed it, following the colonel's orders. They wanted to scare the civilians and make them feel like they depended on the soldiers. Ayaz is about to pull the trigger when a Turkish guy shows up. He's with a group of researchers in a submarine. Pretty much the answer to Matthew's prayers. In Bulgaria, the remaining passengers of Flight 21 escape the bunker and hijack the Russian helicopter. To help them get away, Rick sacrifices himself, taking most of the soldiers with him. The ones left in the bunker are now left with no food and no way out. Nothing but a tiny little hope. One of the rats finally survived a whole day outside. And this is the end. This was a recap of the 2020 series Into the Night by Entre Chien et Loup, starring Jan Bayvuth and Nabil Malet. So, who were you rooting for? What do you think happens next? Let us know in the comments below with #CinemaRecap. Until next time.